Okay, so we were discussing the process API. So we discussed certain system calls like fork and wait and exec system call. So towards the last we discussed this exec system call, and what this exec system call basically does. As we said, we discussed certain examples of fork, but here we did not try to do anything useful. So to do anything useful, whenever we have to create a process, whenever we want to create a new process, basically we would like to execute some program into it. So to do that, this system call is made available for us so that we can load any other executable program into the child process memory image and let it run in the child process. So I think I showed you the demo of one of the program for this. So we discussed this program where basically after forking in the child process, basically we were trying to run a simple command like word count. So this exec system call, as I said, there are multiple variants of this exec system call. The one which we are using is exec VP. If you read the man pages, you will find at least 6 different variants with different arguments and slightly different functionalities. So this exec VP basically uses. So the first argument basically takes is the executable path, the program that you want to execute. So normally you have to give the full path, but as I said, certain standard commands like ls, wc, these all commands, there is the OS already knows the path of these executables. They are stored somewhere in bin, and there is a path file where basically the path of all these standard executables are already stored. So OS can automatically search them them automatically. But if you are giving your own program, if it is in the current folder itself where you're running the current program, then you don't have to give, then just the name is sufficient, but otherwise you have to give the complete path. And then you have to follow, that program may take certain arguments. So you have to follow up the subsequent arguments have to, the second argument is basically a string of characters, which basically takes all the options, all the arguments that you provide while executing that command. And you have to end that list of the arguments by null. So if you do this, basically, just a second. So also in the parent process, we were doing wait. So we will wait for the child till the child finishes, terminates. The parent will not progress further. So we will wait at this point. When the child terminates, then this wait function will return with the ID of the parent of the child which was terminated, and then it will do its printf statement. So I think we ran it yesterday, but just again, it was P3 or P2? Yeah, P3. Okay. So as you can see, in the child process, you see the WC command has actually executed, which is counting the number of lines, number of characters, and the number of bytes, and giving the name of the file where it is basically doing that. And you can see this printf command has not been executed because what is happening now? Now the executable of WC is overwriting the current process child image, memory image. So no more this program is there in the child process. So this printf or anything after exec command, if you write anything, they will not be executed. This system call does not return until unless it fails, it does not return back. So it will continue into the new memory, a new process which is actually running. And you can see the parent has run after parent has printed his printf after the child has completed, because we explicitly put a wait system call. If we did not put wait system call, then it may not be deterministic which one will run, which will run first. That will depend on the scheduler. So I think we completed till this point in the last class, and I have already, as I said, I've already uploaded the PPT slides in the course material in the general channel section, and the code links are are already there on the REMG's website. I don't have to explicitly mention the code every time. Here I have explicitly listed the link for the CPU API code, but from the website you can get for all chapters, wherever these demo codes I will be talking about, you can get it from website. So one question that may come now, that why have exec separately? Why not do the same? Why not do it in the fork system call itself? Let us have more argument in the fork. In the fork itself, provide a provide the path for the new executable, and just use one system call instead of two system calls, isn't it? So so why we need to do this? Maybe I'll talk about this shell program little later on. Before this, so my question to you is that why have to separate? My question to you is that why have these two separate call? Why not have it in the single thing? Just in a single system call? Anybody has any idea?
So we can execute some instruction after the exec call.
We can execute some instruction. Okay, we can execute. Yeah, so we can execute. We can put some code after the fork and before the exec. So by separating the two system call, we can insert some code in between these two system calls. So our fork is creating a new process and exec is loading the new executable into that child process. Now in between them, if we want to do some alteration in the environment for the new process which is going to execute, we can put a relevant code for that. So we can basically alter the environment for the new process, for the new program which is going to be executing soon. And this is very useful. For example, let us take the same example. The same example that we were doing. Basically, we were doing word count. What we were trying to execute? We were trying to execute word count in p3.c, and we were getting this output. Now, instead of getting the output on the terminal, if you want to log this output into some file, let us say log.txt, then I hope you know this arrow operator. This is a redirection operator in Unix. You would have used it in your earlier software labs. So this basically redirects the output from the monitor to the log file that we are trying to create. So now what has happened? You don't get the output on the screen, but you will have, if you see, the new file would have been created, log.txt somewhere. You can see here, and you can actually see this. The output would have been actually written in that log.txt file. So this requires some alteration in the environment. Right now, by default, the standard output for every process is the monitor. The standard output is for the monitor. But before running this, if you can change that standard output from monitor to the file where you want to log the output, then you can insert an appropriate code for that. And let us see the example of that code here. So this fourth program is doing just exactly that. It's slightly difficult to understand this program, but as we have seen the output, it is going, what we are just going to redirect the output of this WC command that we are trying to run into a new file, into a log file. So for that, what we are doing, so as you can see here, we created for, we did for. In the child process, we are going to run the exec command exactly similar, the same way as we did in the previous program pt.c. But before calling this exec program, basically we are doing a slight modification. We have inserted 2 lines of code here. The first line, what it's doing, it's closing the standard output file. So in a Unix operating system, every device is treated like a file. So every device or every open file has a file descriptor. We'll be talking about file descriptor little later in more detail. So file descriptor, you can understand broadly, it's like a pointer to an open file. So through the file descriptor, basically it accesses a particular device or a particular file. And in a Unix operating system maintains a table of file descriptors or an array of file descriptors starting from 0, 1, 2. So normally the first 3 file descriptors are, I don't know the order exactly, but one of them is pointing to the standard output. Second one is pointing to the standard input, and the third one is pointing to the standard error. And then whatever other devices and files you open, they will all be stored in a table. So using this file descriptor 0, file descriptor 1, file descriptor 2, the first 3 are normally your standard output, standard input, and standard error by default. So what we are doing here is we are closing the current standard output file number. So this is another way of accessing. Normally, because these are standard, there is a particular keyword associated with that. So we are just using that here. So I'm just closing the standard output file. So that file descriptor is getting closed, and I'm opening a new file, a log file, which I'm just renaming at p4.output. I'm creating a new file and opening that file with some certain modes. So these modes and all that's when we discuss file systems, we are going to talk in more detail about these system calls related to file opening, file closing, and all that. Right now, just ignore it. So it's going to open a new file where I want to basically log the output. And what Unix system basically does is to assign a file descriptor to this new file, it searches from the beginning of the table. So whichever entry is free, it first of all assigns that to the new file descriptor. So the first, whichever space, which it starts searching from the beginning, and whichever the first empty space or empty file descriptor that it gets, it basically assigns that address to the current file that is being opened. So because just now we have closed the standard output file, this file descriptor is now free. So what it will do is basically it is going to assign the standard output file descriptor to this file. So by doing this, what we have changed the environment of this program. Now the standard output of this program which is going to run will be this output file rather than the monitor. So that's why when this program runs, whatever output it's producing, it's actually, instead of getting it displayed on the monitor, it is getting redirected to this log file, isn't it? So that is what is happening, and I think that's I hope this should be clear to anybody. If anybody wants to ask anything, please ask. Okay, so I think it's clear to everybody. And in fact, basically, so this functionality, this separating the fork and exec is in fact turns out to be very essential for something what we call shell program. So shell is a standard command line interpreter which is available in any Unix or Linux based operating system, and shell basically uses these two. Basically, we'll see just maybe I'll write a simple prototype shell program, and you'll see that shell program is nothing but using this fork and exec system call. So, so what basically shell program is, as we have said that OS, first of all, at the boot time, the OS or the kernel code runs. OS or the kernel code first creates an init process, which spawns further more processes. One of the process which it spawns is your shell program. Now this shell program is responsible for executing all command line, all arguments that we execute in a terminal or any other place. So okay, so so what shell program does, I hope everybody has used a shell program or command line interpreter. What it does?
Sir, shell can be understood as an interface where we can give commands to open new applications.
Okay, an interface to where we can give command to open new applications. Okay.
And like carry out other things as well. Like
have you used this terminal in your
yeah,
previous labs?
yes. Yeah.
Yes, no? Okay. So
Sir, we
why?
can execute multiple command line arguments through if through a shell program. Like we can write a
Okay,
program
good.
that.
Good. So that is another thing. Yeah. So we'll be talking about exactly that in a second. So, but just a rudimentary, we can run series of terminal commands. Okay. Yeah. So in a more rudimentary, first I will talk basics of shell, and then I will talk about more complex things that we can do in shell. So it basically is a command line interpreter. So it reads whatever command user command types on the terminal. So whatever user commands, user give the command, basically generally it parses that that input and extracts out the exact command and its arguments. And then what it would basically do, it will basically fork a child process and execute the exact command which the user has entered. And meanwhile, shell will be down the parent of that child. So shell will actually do a wait. It will wait for the child to finish. Normally, when you enter a command, shell prompt does not come immediately. Till that command is executed, the shell prompt does not come back until unless you run it in a background. If you run the command in a background, if you run a program, then it comes back. So normally it will wait for the child until unless you have explicitly given a command to run that program in the background. And then what it will do, it will repeat. It will again print the terminal prompt and again wait for the next command. And will keep on doing this infinitely till you end that shell program. So this is a basic sequence of steps that shell program does. And I can write a simple shell program for you here itself. And you can see it's nothing but few lines of code, a very basic shell. There are multiple shells also. If you have seen in different Unix systems or within a single OS, you can find there's a bash shell, there is a TCS shell, and so on, with a slight different functionality. So can anybody help me? So what, based on what I've said, let me just write a simple program to do these things. Read a user command, fork a child and exec the command executable, wait for the child and repeat it. So I want to write an algorithm or a code for this. Can anybody help me out? So what, to read a user command, what data should I initialize? What variable should I initialize?
argv and argc.
Okay, but that is for the main program itself. So when the shell program runs, to the shell itself, if you want to give some command, some argument by default arguments, then you need to provide argc and argv. But shell itself doesn't take default arguments. So it is going to read from the, it will going to read what user types. So I'm going to take a character array of some max size, which will basically be able to take a line of input. And then I would need to parse that line of input in order to tokenize the exact command and its argument separately. So for that, I may need a string of character or an array of strings. So I would like to basically what I would like to ask the user to give a command. So I will basically output a terminal. a prompt. So this is a prompt. So different terminal have different, some give prompt like this. So the one we are using here, you can see the prompt is a $sign. So so when user sees the prompt, he is going to basically input certain thing, some command. So I'm going to read that. I can do a scanf on that. I'll do a read the entire line of command till /n in a line. And once I have read the command, I can parse it, or before parsing it, I can just directly fork a child process, and I can just handle in case the return value is less than 0, then probably fork failed, so I don't want to continue. I can just exit. Else if RC is greater than 0, then this is the shell program itself, the parent program itself, which has forked. So normally what we are saying, we'll wait for the child, the parent. I would like to wait for the child, so I will basically do a wait system call here. And in the last option, that will be, this will be for the child process, where I want to execute the command. So here I can basically try to parse that. So I have to write a function for this. I can write a function tokenize. I will leave that an exercise to you, how to parse a command, a line of command, and what output I would like to basically this tokenize would basically parse this line of input and basically creates separate tokens into this thing. So either I can make it a yeah, because it will be available for the child, so it can actually, so I think this we could have made it a global process, or we can directly write the exact function, exact code here itself for tokenize. I'm just, for simplicity, I'm just using a function call, but you can exactly write a code here, and I'm assuming it is going to return me the tokens. So I can basically use our system call, and in the first token will be our command, followed by the arguments that the command is taken, and I'm going to pass that in our exec VP. So this is going to execute the new command, new program in the child process with all its arguments. Of course, there may be slight here and there error, because if otherwise I have to pass these tokens as an argument to this. If this tokenize is another function outside main, then I have to take this out and make it a global variable and so on. But I think you can understand that much programming, you can understand how to handle that. So, and this thing I want to repeat it, so I can put a while loop, an infinite while loop, and that's it. So this is a simple shell program, and in fact you can write it out and you can try to execute it. Just implement this tokenize function, depends on how you want to pass the input, and you can write it, and you can see you may be getting this kind of a program which is actually be able to execute commands for you. So it's nothing great, but this is a very simple basic shell that we have implemented. Shell does many other things. For example, before I talk about that, anybody wants to ask anything here in this? If anybody has not understood anything in this code that I have written, you can ask, because this is going to be your first lab assignment. Your first lab assignment will.
Clarification I wanted. So if we are doing the fork because we have to do exec VP later, and
Correct.
we can't execute anything after exec VP, like everything will go away. That's why we're doing the fork, right? Otherwise we could have just written it.
Yeah, if we don't create a new process, if we do it in the you want to say I want to do it in the shell program itself, in the shell
Yeah.
process itself. The problem is, as I said, many before calling these exec VPs, many times we will have to alter the environment. We have to insert codes to alter the environment. So if you have to redirect the output, or if you have to use pipes, and if you have to use other things, we'll have to insert code in it. So altering that environment and then re-altering that environment again and again, it's better. Instead of doing it in the parent process, it's better to create a new child process and let it just finish it off. Instead of for every command you alter the environment for that process. So altering the environment is not recommended every time. That is one important reason why we want to do a fork and run this thing in a separate, run this program as a separate child process. Another important reason is, if there is an error, if there is something wrong happen, your shell itself will terminate. Your shell will crash. If there is, in case this program is erroneous or something happens, and this program crashes, then your shell itself will crash. And you may not want to do that. You may, if your child crashes, your shell is still alive, and you'll be able to run. You can just say an output that this program didn't work or there was an error, and let it. You'll be ready for executing another program. But if you do it in the same process, if you don't create a new child process, then anything went wrong, the entire shell will crash. So it's always recommended to create a new process to do that. And there are other reasons which we'll talk about, that I'm going to talk about. So these are very basic rudimentary things that I've written.
Okay.
You will have to actually do, shell does many other things which cannot be done unless you create a child process. Any other question or doubt?
Sir, I have a doubt. Sir, if we execute the process in the parent process only and do not create a child, just as an example, will the parent process be terminated as well after the execution?
Yeah, that is the most obvious reason why we should not call an exec in the parent process itself. Sorry, that should be the first reason it should have come in my mind. The problem with exec, as you have seen, it actually overwrites it takes the new command program executable and it overwrites the current code. So if you do it in the parent process itself, then your shell program will no longer be running itself. So good for good observation. So that's why there's another reason why we can't do it. We should not do an exec VP on the shell program parent process itself. Otherwise, your shell code itself will go away. It will be overwritten by the new program that you are calling it. Yeah, good. Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, any other?
Will the process be same, like how after exec VP it is returning back to the parent, same as how after the child process ends, it return back to the parent?
No. Child process does not return back to the parent. Child process goes and terminates.
The same thing will happen with exec VP, right?
So if you do it in the parent process itself, then your parent process itself will get terminated. So shell program will not continue further. So only one command it will be able to execute, and no more than that.
So my question was, after exec VP, it will again, like, this process will terminate and it will again point to the parent. That is all, right?
Point to the parent means what?
Like again, the control comes back to the parent.
No, as I said, this shell, if in this case, shell is your main program. Your main.c is your shell. It is running. And at some point in time, when you call a fork, it created a new child process, and this program continues. So this program it's an independent program. Your shell program is now independent shell process, and your child, where you are doing exec, this is an independent process. Shell program has some control over child process in case he wants to kill this, or even in case he wants to wait for this finish to finish. But child as such has no control over parent. So this child process completes and finishes and goes away. It gets removed from the ready queue. Shell program will continue doing its own job irrespectively of how child was. Only because we have put wait here, that's why some dependency is coming here. It will wait till child finishes. If you don't put wait, it will be again available for executing a new program. It will go back to the while, and it will wait for the next program to next command to come. So for example, if you run the child process, if you run the command in as a background process, then you won't do a wait call here. You will just immediately go back to printf, and you will be ready for the new command to execute. Okay, so I think, yeah, both clarifications were, I think, necessary, because I think still people are not clear about. So one thing I will recommend, there are some simulations in this Ramji's book. After every chapter, there is a homework exercise, and that homework exercise, in fact, is not a theoretical exercise. They have provided a Python script which basically helps you simulate some of the functionalities that have been discussed in the program. So in that chapter, for example, in this chapter, I'll probably at the end of the class, I'll show that Python script. So there is one Python script which is provided called fork.python. You can give different arguments, and you can simulate how different processes run, how the child hierarchy, how this parent or process hierarchy comes, and you can get a more hang out of it. So if still you have some problem, some difficulty in visualization, probably using those simulator code will help you in getting more clarity how things work out. It's not an exact OS code, it's just a simulator code which just simulates how things happens in an OS, or when these system calls are basically invoked. So I'll definitely recommend you to experiment with those simulators after every chapter is finished. So let me move forward then. Okay, we have 20 minutes more. So as I said, shell has a more complicated shell, has many other things to do. So one thing, shell is in fact a very powerful, in fact, one of the earlier Unix systems, most of the programming could be done just using shell commands. So more advanced shell program basically provides functionalities like they have pipes. So pipes basically helps to connect an output of one program to the input of another program. So pipe is basically a kind of a queue which OS maintains for different programs. So in user space, if there are two processes running P1 and P2, let us say, and they want to communicate with each other, probably one is a producer process, let us say, another is the consumer process, and they're interdependent. Output of this is consumed by another process, and so on. So OS basically provides a mechanism which is called pipe. That is one of the mechanisms. There are other mechanisms also. So pipe has basically two ends, input end or output end, and you can connect it. Normally there are more complex pipes also. There are full duplex pipes and so on. But right now I don't just want to discuss a simple pipe. So you can connect the output or input of one process to one of the end of the pipe, and similarly the output or the input of the other process to the other end of the pipe. And in that way you can communicate between two processes. Input and output will get communicated between two processes through the help of OS. So in the earlier days, OS, these pipes would help us to connect multiple programs in a sequence and do a more complex task, which cannot be done just by using one or two commands. So for example, let us say you want to search a word in a file. So normally you use a grep command for that. And let us say you have a file where you have written some words and you want to search hello wherever these are there, and you want to count how many lines you found these words. So you can actually you can use pipes, the pipe, to connect the output of this program to the input of this another program, which is your word count program. So what it will do, I'll just show you in the terminal here. I have, in fact, just before the class started, I was just testing this. I've already, you can see. So there is a, so I've already written a file.txt. You can just see the input of that file. I've just written three lines there. Hello, how are you? Hello, dear. Let's say hello. So what I want to do, I just want to basically search this word hello. So it's case sensitive. So there are three hello. Two of them have capital hello H. So I'm just searching this capital H one here from this file.txt. And if I just output it, the output will come on the terminal. So it is just going to say that there are two hellos, two occurrences of this hello I found. But let us say I want to count, if it's a big file and I just want to count how many lines this you have found this. So I can redirect or connect if I run this way. So you can see what this has done. The output of this grep, this is going to basically give this output is now going to this WC program, which is basically counting. I have just the dash L basically means I'm just going to output the number of lines. So it is basically telling me there are 2 lines in this thing. So I've connected the output of the first program as an input to the other program by using this pipe. So this one vertical line is basically a symbol for pipe, and you can go on doing it for multiple. You can go on doing this. You can give as an input to any other program and so on. In this way, you can actually create a very more powerful task. You can get a very complex task done just by using a single line of a command. And this again, so to implement this, you have to do some modification here. You have to modify this code. You have to do some changes in this simple code of this shell program to be able to do that. And again, the file descriptor. So these inputs and outputs are again treated as file descriptors. So you have to use these file descriptors and all that things. So in the lab assignment, probably you will get an opportunity to experiment with these things. Another thing, also there are wild characters which shell programs before this also. So if you would have actually heard of shell scripting. So in fact, you can write a simple script file using these shell commands and using this redirection and pipes and other things, and can actually build a completed program just using these shell scripts. So probably I think if in one of your earlier labs you may have written some shell scripts program, and this is how it actually works. Apart from that, there are other things that are there are a lot of other interfaces. For interacting with the processes in the Unix. We have just covered few important ones. So one important thing that I just want to also tell, there is interrupts also. So there is one system called skill, which can be used to send signals to processes. So I'll be talking about these pipes and other things in inter-process communication. So there is a topic that later on we'll talk about inter-process communication, how different processes communicate with each other. What are different mechanisms which OS provides for them. So probably we'll discuss more detail about pipes. Similarly, signals is also another form of process communication, sending some signal to another process. So it's kind of an interrupt signal. Also, if you remember, if you want to kill a process, you generally type Control-C or Control-Z in your terminal. So those combinations of keystrokes basically generate a particular type of signal which is sent to the currently running process. And there are interfaces through a system calls through which you can receive those interrupts and do a specific task for those things. Does execvp find commands from the path, or do you have to put the entire path? So as I said, for the standard program, for the standard commands whose executables are there in the bin folder or standard things, there are already those paths are already written in the path file. So execvp will find, if you are not specifying the entire path, it will first search, by default it will first search in the current folder. If it doesn't find in the current folder, it will open the .path file and it will read there. If it finds there, it's fine. If it does not find there, it will give an error. So you have done when RC is less than 0 exit, that is when making child process fails, you exit. So in this case, you are also terminating shell itself. Yes. So here, as I said, I'm just writing a very simple shell program. I'm not doing a complex thing. You can actually, it will be your job to improve this shell program. That will be your first lab assignment, to write a more advanced shell program, which actually handles different errors or different interrupts and different things in a more proper way. So I'll be sending out that lab assignment things. How we are going to evaluate it and how we are going to do this, I'll inform you later on. But probably by end of this, in the beginning of next week, I'm going to mail you the first lab assignment, which is exactly on this shell program. So that's why I'm discussing this in more details. Of course, you will have to do some study on your own also, but most of things I have already discussed in the class. So as I said, there are some signals, interrupts and so on. And there are specific mechanisms to basically handle those signals and do a particular handling of those signals, those interrupts. So that we will be discussing in the lab assignment itself, the details of that. I'll skip here in the theory, that part. So I think that's all that I wanted to discuss on the process API. I think I've spent more than the planned amount of time. Again, before switch, because now we don't have a lot of time left, so probably I'd like to just show you the simulator that are available in this in REMG's website. So from the REMG's website, you can download this GitHub folder, OSTP homework. You can go to that folder I have downloaded here. You will find that for different chapters, there are different folders. For almost every chapter, they have provided a simulator, so as to experiment with different concepts that have been discussed in that chapter. So for CPU API, what we are discussing is CPU API. So if you go to that folder, you will find there is a fork.py and there is generator.py. So both are Python script. Generator is basically meant for generating some random data. I don't know exactly. So you will have to follow I have not myself experimented with this. You have to follow the instructions that are given in the homework exercises. So for example, if I run this fork command and it says, the first question, it says run this with seed argument. So you can basically, you can know what are the arguments that this program takes and try to understand that. So what if I run this with the seed program as 10 and check the answers? So for example, it is simulating some process creation and forking and drawing you the hierarchy. So when initially there is a process, it forks, creates a B process, you have this hierarchy. Then when A again forks another process C, you get this hierarchy. If C exits, C goes out of the hierarchy. A forks another, it comes here. So it's a very simple simulation, nothing much here, but there are other options. If you play around with those options, probably you will get some more feel of or hang of it, what exactly it's doing. So by default, I think it will run in your terminal because one of the minimal version of Python is already installed in the recent Ubuntu version. If not, you have to sudo install that the Python for running these scripts in your terminal. So I will leave it to you how to do this exercise. The next thing that I'll just discuss in brief, what we are going to discuss in the next class. So we are going to, as I said, one of the problems we did not discuss. We discussed the first two problems while discussing the mechanism. I think long back. Yeah. So we discussed these first two questions. The third question, if A does something slow, or if it goes for a disk IO or something, what should be done? So that is going to be, we paused to just complete this API thing because I had to give out this lab assignment also. But our next topic is exactly going to be that. We are going to talk about the next problem, which is when a process goes for an IO, or something very slow, then what should be done? So OS is running. So let us say we know the mechanism now exactly. It goes for when it has to or let us say not OS, maybe let us say a program A is running. Now it issued a disk IO, so it will trap into the OS. OS will do some system call. Now here, if it goes for a disk IO, let us say. Now disk IO, if you have some feel of this, any disk operation, it's a multiple order of magnitude smaller than CPU execution. So if an instruction takes few microseconds, it will at least take 1,000 times more time than a single disk IO will take 1,000 times more time than a CPU execution or a memory read. So during that time, you would not like to keep this waiting forever for this IO to complete. You would immediately write to return from the tab, and decide some other process to run. So if there is another process in the ready queue, let that other process be to run. So now what process should run from the list of the ready queue? That question is a policy question, or as an algorithm question, is a high level question that will depend on the exact scheduling policy. So that is going to be our next topic. We are going to discuss different scheduling policies or algorithms which decides, because our goal is to keep our utilization maximum, efficiency maximum. So if any of the resource is idle, we would like to do some other activities so that different resources are getting utilized parallelly. So that is going to be our next topic. I'll stop here. One or two questions anybody wants to take, I'll take attendance in between.
Sir, I have a question related to fork.
Mm-hmm.
Suppose we have a static data member.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's not saved on the stack, right? It's stored somewhere else. So for the child process or the parent process, that variable should be in the same place or a different place.
It doesn't matter, because as I said, it will when the new process is created, it will copy everything, including the code and static data. So it will make a separate copy of
the static data.
Yeah, the entire memory address space of the parent process will get copied into the child process. So including the code, including the static data, and everything will get copied to the child process. So in that sense, it really doesn't matter whether you are making it as a static variable, or you are making it as a global variable or local variable.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay.